Good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 8th. I'll call the meeting to order and we'll do a roll call.
Chrisman? Here. Gribovich? Hartley?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
Leeper? Lynch?
Here.
Moser? Here. 2 absent.
Great. Okay, so we will move into our meeting minutes from the January 25th, 2023. Is there any discussion? Would need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, this is a time in the meeting where we open it up for public comment on anything that is not on the agenda. With our large crowd, I'm guessing we probably don't have a huge public comment, but we'll open that up. All right. We have no old business, so we will move into new business with a zoning text amendment to expand the list of potential conditional uses of defunct institutional buildings. And Chris, you're going to take that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Good evening. So we received a request for an amendment to the zoning code to add hair salons to the list of uses allowed for consideration as a conditional use of a defunct institutional building. The applicant is requesting this change because they would like to have an opportunity to apply to the Board of Adjustment for a conditional use to repurpose the church building they own at 209 Walnut Street for use as a hair salon. It should be noted that text amendment is not address specific, so we're not evaluating what they're doing at that address. So personal service uses such as a salon are not currently listed as a qualifying use for consideration under the conditional use provision of the zoning code. As far as the current uses eligible for consideration by the Board of Adjustment in this unique situation of church buildings and other institutional buildings, the list of use categories that were then adopted or that were adopted in 2021 when this code was adopted are the following. So hospitality-oriented uses such as retreat facilities, convention centers, guest houses, meeting halls, and event facilities. Conversion to a multi-unit dwelling in a zone where such use is not otherwise allowed or where the proposed number of units exceeds the number otherwise allowed in the zone. Community service uses such as libraries, museums, senior centers, etc. Specialized education facilities such as music schools, dramatic schools, dance studios, etc. And then professional office uses such as accountants, lawyers, architects, or similar. Now it should be noted that professional office uses, we have an adopted use category code that was adopted toward the end of 2021, and professional offices do not include this kind of salon use. That would be considered a personal service use. So that's where that differentiates. So when drafting the original code provision, staff considered other uses that would be similar to the community assembly type activity level of a church, such as the hospitality and community services, service uses listed. Since these buildings often have large interior spaces that might be conducive to classrooms, we included specialized education uses as an option. There has been at least one church in the community that has successfully been converted to apartments, but that should be noted that wasn't based on this code provision. It was actually in an R4 zone where that would have been allowed. So that's one reason why multi-unit dwellings were listed as a possibility. Professional office uses are typically fairly low impact uses, so were included as well. Staff felt that this list was liberal enough to be useful but limited enough to be appropriate for residential zones. The applicant maintains that it is not liberal enough since some neighborhoods may be in favor of lighter retail or personal service uses, and that determination can be made by the Board of Adjustment with any neighborhood input received. With that in mind, below, or next, I should say, is a breakdown of the pros and cons. You'll see on the screen. I'll start with the pros. So the traffic and activity of a hair salon or similar personal service use may be less imposing to a neighborhood than a church or some of the other community assembly uses listed. Hair salons and other similar personal services are common home occupations and may not be any more obtrusive than a professional office use. Adding it to the list in the city code does not grant any automatic right to a use, as the Board of Adjustment can reject any proposal if it is not a good fit for the subject property. Neighbors are notified and given opportunity to oppose or provide input to the Board of Adjustment. And conditions can be imposed by the Board of Adjustment to make a use better fit for the neighborhood context, such as limiting the hours of operation, exterior lighting, and signage. A broader use list, now the last point, a broader use list can provide greater utility of the conditional use code, particularly for smaller properties that may not be able to accommodate the traffic and activities for a community assembly type use. Okay, now for the cons. Some retail sales and service uses may be considered more controversial in residential neighborhoods than the other uses listed in the conditional use code. The conditional use code provision has not been in effect very long, and therefore the Board of Adjustment has yet to review a conditional use case and I would say develop their experience in considering this kind of land use matter. Text amendments have application across the community, so they're very broad in their application. So it will not just apply to this property owned by the applicant. Expanding the list could further spur further requests for amendments to allow a broader range of uses. And there were concerns about the conditional use code provision when initially considered and adopted. So perhaps the concept should be tested before it is expanded any further. With broader use considerations, this is the last point, neighborhood residents close to churches may need to be more vigilant and be willing to provide input when a reuse is considered. So, now, this is just the first meeting, so what we're talking about is setting of a public hearing. But I did want to say, if the commission would be inclined to recommend approval at that point of the public hearing, staff suggests the following wording that's up on the screen, which is that it would list personal service uses, which is one of the use categories, limited to hair salons, shoe repair, tailoring services, therapy-based services, and photographic studios. These uses are primarily appointment-based services used by all ages and thus may be more appropriate in neighborhood contexts than other retail or service uses that have more unpredictable levels of activity. In addition, staff believes that if approved, this limited approach would accomplish the applicant's objective without adding a seemingly arbitrary salon use on its own. It should be noted that staff does not fully support this text amendment. If it is adopted, but I should note that if it is adopted, the Board of Adjustment may reject any conditional use proposal or impose any reasonable conditions based on neighborhood input. And with that, I'll just say staff recommends that the commission discuss this proposal and set a public hearing for February 22nd for formal consideration and recommendation to City Council.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any questions for staff before we get started?
Should we discuss it today or discuss it when it's a public meeting?
It's appropriate to discuss some today if there are any concerns. I think that's good for the applicant to understand the concerns by the commission.
Great. Any other questions? Would the applicant like to speak to this item? Sure. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Chad Welsh. 6701 Strayer Road is where we live. So we're just looking to expand this use. The only concern or question I have, I guess, is it's more of a makeup salon and brow salon. I don't know if that is just covered under the hair salon or if there needs to be a specific thing. Don't know how loose salon is, I guess.
That's a great question. I'd never received that clarification, but we can clarify the language
than that,
here.
I mean, I guess I don't have a whole lot to say. It's just here to answer any questions or try to alleviate any concerns and see what we can do to make it work.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Is there any public comment? Name and address for the record, please.
Stephen Jordan, 2510 Cottage Row Road, Cedar Falls. I'm Chad's Realtor. I'm just speaking on behalf of it and just pushing on the fact that regardless of if this is adopted to code, no matter what, for each and every specific use at a specific property, it's still going to have to go in front of the Board of Adjustment. So therefore, there is another overseeing body, and we're just not going to go put salons everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Well, that first question actually echoes a question I was about to ask, because hair salon seemed really specific, and when I was trying to think about it from a situational perspective, it didn't seem any different to me than perhaps a nail salon or something like that. So if there was going to be suggestions for the language use, I was just going to simply suggest changing it to salon instead of hair salon so specifically. And like, if I'm understanding it correctly, this is just changing the guidelines and not necessarily the process and oversight involved, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kyle.
Could we get a definition on defunct institutional building? Like what will that apply to in the future?
We would say any building that is empty. I mean, that's not currently being used for its intended use.
Okay.
And it has to be institutional use, so an institutional use would be a church or a school or, you know.
Great. Any other comments?
Yeah, I remember when this came across in 21, I think you said it was, and we discussed it. And at that time, of course, I really liked the repurpose of a building. I think we all understand how challenging marketing a church building or an old school building is for a repurpose, and the more accepting we can be within reason to that, the better to try to repurpose something like that. So at this point, I'm relatively open to this, but I would like to hear more on the subject. But anytime we can bring some infill into some buildings that are sitting empty, the better. So.
I'm 100% in agreement with that. You know, I love all of the development that's happening and, you know, in the south and southwest side of town, but I love when we can repurpose buildings in the central part of the community.
This falls under the downtown character district, so they would have to follow certain guidelines, or no?
No,
just
so this
outside
this
of it?
is specifically for our zones.
Gotcha.
R1, R2, R3 essentially, and some R4. I think it could apply in those cases as
Gotcha.
well if there is a use here that is not
So there,
outrightly allowed in R4.
yeah, so I think it applies across, we just want to be clear, it applies across the city, and as you know, a lot of churches and schools are located in low-density residential neighborhoods, so that was the caution here, is that it would apply to any church or school or any of these buildings that are located in, single-family neighborhoods,
Yep.
basically.
Makes sense.
So with that said, any proposal would have to go through the Board of Adjustments just the same.
Yes.
So I guess if that's the case, then why would this specific proposal not already be there? What is the purpose of the zoning text specifically? Amending that, I mean.
So the zoning code, it's the conditional use, and so when the code provision right now limits what are the qualifying uses, so it's not just any use can go into a defunct building. The code provision limits it to certain things. So
So the Board of Adjustment doesn't have superseding authority?
the Board of Adjustment only has the authority granted by what's in the zoning code.
Okay.
They have no additional authority.
So if they were to approve this specific matter, this zoning text amendment would be required in order for that to work?
Right.
Okay.
They can't allow things that are not specifically listed in the code.
Well, I'd move to set the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we will set that public hearing, have that public hearing on our February 22nd meeting. All right, moving on to our other item that we have of the discussion of amending the Planning and Zoning Commission bylaws to reduce the number of members from 9 to 7. And I'm assuming, Karen, you're going to speak to that?
Well, I think this was an idea, and I think the mayor had floated this idea. We've had some challenge recruiting. We have a pretty large commission, so I did do a little bit of research. I think this could go either way, and I think the idea was we get opinions from the current commission to see if you pros and cons of doing this, and then could bring back amendments to your bylaws if you think this is a good idea. Did a little bit of research on other, sizes of commissions. These are statutory commissions, so all cities that have zoning have planning and zoning commissions. So I looked at survey of the top 20 most populous cities in Iowa, which also includes Cedar Falls. There are 11 cities with 7-member commissions, 6 cities with 9-member commissions, 2 cities with 11, and Des Moines has 15. Some of those cities that have larger amounts are, much larger cities like Des Moines. The cities that have 7 include Dubuque, Iowa City, Mason City, Ames, West Des Moines, Ankeny, and Bettendorf, just to name some of those. So it's just really a discussion for you guys, your thoughts on pros and cons of keeping it the same or reducing the number.
Open it up.
I have a question or a clarification. One of the pros of the pros and cons, as I understood it, was that it would lower the quorum threshold. Is that correct, or could you clarify the specifics of how quorum or a pass-fail vote is affected?
So the quorum is always a majority of the commission. So that's why we have to have a quorum here to hold the meeting. So when we're down a couple commissioners and don't have people appointed to those positions, the quorum for a 9-member commission is still 5. And so I know a couple meetings we've had a little trouble getting a quorum here for meetings. If the commission was 7 members, the quorum would be 4. So the challenge is the same. It's just that right now, if we have seats that are empty and vacant, it makes it a little bit of a challenge.
Right.
So I know we have a lot of commissions, committees, boards with the city. And so I had a conversation with the mayor And there's a lot of boards and commissions that have open seats right now. And my perspective, just, as this is my, we just had my first full year here on the commission, and I didn't know that the seat was open or available, except for the fact that I was listening to Karen talk to Councilman Harding. And, so I had suggested to the mayor that perhaps we could do a little bit better marketing of these open positions, including putting them in the currents, and just doing more social media posts, and then maybe utilizing some of the other entities that are involved in other things in the city, such as neighborhood associations, to just send out emails to their listservs and just say, hey, these positions are open if anyone's interested in applying. So I guess that conversation was just had a couple weeks ago, so at this point I think maybe we should consider just waiting a little bit longer before we make a decision to see if anyone, is interested. I think this particular commission is a really good opportunity for people to learn and grow and be involved in their community, and it's a pretty low commitment, compared to some of the other options that are available. So, yeah, I guess I just think maybe there is some opportunity for more people to be a part of our commission that don't know that it's possible.
The last time we had vacancies to fill, I don't know what was done to quote unquote market the high paying gig, but it seemed like we had a lot of respondents. In fact, if I remember my numbers correctly, it seems like we narrowed it to a final cut of about a dozen or so, and then a vetting process to get to maybe half that in finalists. Has there been any follow-up with some of those people? I can't imagine from my recollection of the conversations with some of them that there might not have been a few candidates that the conditions haven't changed to where they would be disinterested now when they were a year or two ago.
So I don't know if your memory is maybe quite right. I think, Kyle, we interviewed all the applicants that we had at the time. There might have been a couple that had bowed out, but we interviewed. You're right, we did have a group that we did interview. I think the mayor has reached out to a couple of those that weren't appointed at the time, and they're no longer interested. So I think people's lives change, and we have applications on file, but sometimes they get old, and then people have changed their mind on things.
Sure, that was just recently enough. I thought that it might be. I was just curious as to if there was follow-up with them, or if it was starting from scratch, or what.
This is kind of the mayor's process, so he's the one that's reaching out to people.
Yeah, that
and
makes
so
sense.
we always give him the list of people that have applied, and then he makes the call on that. So
I can't believe this glamorous job isn't got a line of people waiting to participate, but I am a little gun shy to make a drastic change when it's been operating for, I'm sure, decades this way. I like the fact that it gives us a pretty deep bench, and we do go through, people doing vacations and personal time, so not everyone can get here. So I like that ability. Not that it couldn't work. I'm not opposed to the 7-member commission, but I guess I'm not in a hurry to change it from 9. But clearly, if we can't get any candidates to want to participate, a change would have to be made. So I do concur that maybe marketing it more, at which it sounds good to say that. I'm not the one marketing it. So, but yes, I think there are some people that would like to get active with participating in some type of city business, and this is a good way to get involved and kind of learn how the city functions and participate in something without having to run a campaign and win an election to do it. So there's some value there, and hopefully someone's watching tonight that wants to come sit with us, because it is this is my second term on this on the commission, and it's been very eye-opening and interesting. I really have come to enjoy participating in this. So
Well, if somebody is watching this, I'm sure they'd make a great candidate. Yeah, I can't say that having the quorum reduce by an entire whole number isn't really attractive. The only thing that gives me pause is a conversation I had with the mayor quite a while ago was about just the broad strokes of what should make up a body like this. And we both, I think, learned a lot from the conversation, but I was touching on some of the professional diversity that I think is crucial to a body like this functioning. And I think I said specifically, it's hard to imagine a board like this without a real estate agent or a construction specialist or an architect. You wouldn't want all of any one of those things. And I guess the more the merrier from that perspective.
Yeah, it brings some diversity if you have a bigger selection of the public participating, so.
I do think it's interesting. I just recall my own story, right, of having to have the learning curve straight up to learn everything that we were doing. And it's been a pleasure to be able to serve in that way. However, it is hard to find folks these days to do a lot of things civically. So what can we do to make this more attractive? I don't know. I think we're all pretty attractive people to be watching, but that's just my personal opinion. Yeah, right. Snacks. Yeah, but I mean, really, I think you're right, Kyle. And diversity is important in a lot of ways, right? So, what can we do to find folks like that? I think it's also our job, perhaps, to do a little recruiting ourselves too, to find the right folks that might be good to sit up here with us.
Would it be possible for you to just remind us about the application process and if people are interested, where they go to apply and what those steps are?
Yeah, so the mayor has set up a process for that. We have an application that's available, I believe, online, and we can easily get it to anybody that they can just contact the city clerk's office for any board or commission. And there's a general application where people can list multiple, they can check the box for multiple commissions or boards that they're interested in. And then when there's openings on certain boards or commissions, we send out a specific questionnaire based on, specifics of that commission or board, and they answer that questionnaire if they're interested in being appointed at that point in time. And then there's an interview set up with the chair of the commission, somebody appointed by the city administrator, and then the city council member that is in charge of that particular. All the boards and commissions have are associated with one of the committees, the council committees. So whoever's in charge of that particular committee would be the person that would be on that interview panel. And they're informal interviews. I think some of you went through those interviews.
I think we all have at one point, right?
Yeah.
So, and then after that, the interview, we submit a memo to the mayor, and then he has opportunity to talk with anybody that he wants to of the people that were interviewed, and then he makes the recommendation to the full city council.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Well, I think the incentive to go from a quorum of 5 to 4 could be outweighed by a attendance incentive of some kind.
So I'm getting the general feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard a number of comments that people are kind of thinking maybe we should wait and try to recruit people for the open positions a little bit more. Am I characterizing the conversation correctly?
That's
Yeah,
how
I
I
think
hear
it
it.
makes
And,
sense
and
to-
if we have an option to fill these positions, great. If not, maybe we need to revisit.
Yep.
But
So can we just defer this to
Sure.
April or something
Yeah.
like that?
Q2.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Is there any additional commission updates, Karen?
I don't have anything else. I did hand out, I do have one thing, the conflict of interest forms. I think a number of you filled those out for me, but there's a few that have not yet, so just please get those to me as soon as possible. You can even scan them and email them back at your earliest convenience. Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.